Captain Taman Kim sat in his chair on the bridge of the Horizon's Promise, watching the stars drift past the view screen. His ship was small compared to the massive vessels of the older alien races, but it was home. For 3 months now, he and his crew had been traveling through neutral space, carrying messages between Earth and the Galactic Coalition headquarters. Humanity had joined the Coalition only 15 years ago. The other species still treated humans like children who had just learned to walk. Taman understood why. Some of these alien civilizations had been exploring space for thousands of years. Humanity had barely left their own solar system when the aliens found them. "Captain, I'm picking up something on sensors," said Ji-Won Park from the science station. She was young, only 26, but brilliant. Earth's best xenobiology expert had recommended her personally for this mission. Taman leaned forward. "What is it?" "Large ships. Moving in formation. I count 15 of them." Ji-Won's fingers danced across her console. "They're big, sir. Really big." At the communication station, Hejin Choi looked up with wide eyes. "Captain, I'm getting identification signals." "Those are Velkari warships." The bridge went quiet. Everyone knew about the Velkari. They were the Coalition's dominant military power, the species everyone else feared and respected. Their empire stretched across hundreds of star systems. Their warships were legendary. In 3,000 years, they had never lost a major war. "Are they hostile?" asked Doyen Lee from the security station. His hand moved toward the weapons controls, though everyone knew the Horizon's Promise had no weapons that could threaten a Velkari warship. "I don't think so," said Hyejin. "They're just passing through. Standard patrol formation." Taman relaxed slightly. "Maintain course. Give them plenty of space. We don't want any trouble." The Velkari ships were massive, each one 10 times the size of the Horizon's Promise. Their hulls were dark red, almost black, decorated with symbols that Taman couldn't read. They moved through space with perfect coordination like a school of fish swimming in the ocean. "They're beautiful," whispered Narration from the engineering station. She had been quiet most of the journey, focused on keeping the ship's old engines running. But even she couldn't help staring at the Velkari fleet. "They're dangerous," Doyen corrected. "Those ships could destroy us in seconds." Taman nodded. "Which is why we're going to be polite and stay out of their way." The Velkari convoy continued on its path. The Horizon's Promise altered course slightly, moving to pass them at a safe distance. Everything seemed fine. Just another routine encounter in neutral space. Then the communications console started beeping. "Captain, we're receiving a signal," said Hyejin. She frowned at her screen. "It's on a strange frequency. I've never seen this pattern before." "From the Velkari?" "Yes, sir. I think they're asking us to identify ourselves." Taman stood up. "Send them our identification codes. Standard diplomatic protocol." Hyejin's hands moved across her controls. But something was wrong. Her frown deepened. "Captain, the translation software is having trouble. The Velkari language has changed since our last update. Can you send the message manually?" "I think so. Just give me a moment." Taman waited. He could feel sweat forming on his forehead. This was his first major mission as captain. He didn't want to start a diplomatic incident with the most powerful military in the galaxy. "Message sent," Hyejin announced. The bridge crew waited. The Velkari ships continued their formation, showing no sign of changing course. Taman started to breathe easier. Then every alarm on the bridge started screaming at once. "Captain, the Velkari ships are changing formation," Ji-Won shouted over the noise. "They're surrounding us." Taman grabbed his chair as the ship shook. "What's happening?" "They're targeting us with their weapons." Doyen's voice was high with panic. "Shields won't hold more than one shot." "Hyejin, what did we say to them?" Taman demanded. The communications officer's face was pale. "I sent our standard greeting. We come in peace. We mean no harm." "Then why are they—" Another message came through, this time with harsh, angry sounds. The translation software struggled to keep up, spitting out broken phrases. Taman caught only fragments. Insult, ancestors, war, death. His stomach dropped. "Hyejin, what did we actually send them?" She was frantically checking her systems, her hands shaking. Oh no. "Captain, the frequency we used. According to the Velkari database, it's reserved for combat challenges. Only warriors use that frequency. So they think we challenged them to a fight? Worse." Hyejin's voice was barely a whisper. The translation algorithm was outdated. "It converted our message wrong. Very wrong." "How wrong?" She looked at him with tears in her eyes. According to this, we told them, we declare war on their entire species and insult their dead ancestors. The bridge was completely silent except for the beeping of alarms. Can we send a correction? An apology? Taemin felt his heart pounding. I'm trying. Heejin was typing frantically. Sending message now. I'm telling them it was a mistake. A misunderstanding. They waited. The Velkari ships continued to surround them, weapons still locked on target. Then a new message came through. This time the translation was clear and perfect. Human vessel. Your insult has been recorded. Your apology is rejected. Under ancient Velkari law, a declared challenge cannot be withdrawn. You have insulted our empire and our ancestors. We accept your declaration of war. You have 3 of your months to prepare. The Velkari Empire will come to your homeworld. We will show you the price of dishonor. The message ended. The Velkari ships broke formation and jumped away, disappearing into faster-than-light travel. Taemin slowly sat down in his chair. His legs wouldn't hold him anymore. Did that just happen? Asked Nari quietly. Jiwon was checking her computer, running calculations. Captain, the Velkari Empire has over 6,000 warships. Humanity has maybe 200 ships, and most of those are cargo vessels with a few weapons attached. Can we fight them? Doyen asked, though his voice said he already knew the answer. No, said Jiwon simply. We can't. They'll destroy us. Earth, Mars, every human colony. Gone. Taemin looked at his crew. They were all young, all good at their jobs. They had trusted him to lead them safely through space. And now, because of a communication error on his ship, the entire human race was going to die. We need to contact Earth immediately, he said, surprised his voice wasn't shaking. Send everything. The full recording of what happened. Every detail. Already sending, Heejin confirmed, tears running down her face. Taemin stood and walked to the view screen. The stars looked the same as they had 5 minutes ago. Beautiful, distant, cold. But everything had changed. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Coalition for 15 years. They had learned so much, met so many new species, dreamed of a future among the stars, and now, because of one mistake, one wrong word at the wrong frequency, that future was ending. Set course for Earth, Taemin ordered quietly. Maximum speed. We need to get home. As the Horizon's promise turned toward Earth, Taemin wondered how he would ever explain this. How do you tell people that you accidentally started a war with the galaxy's deadliest species? How do you apologize for ending the world? Behind them, light years away, the Velkari Empire was already mobilizing its fleets. War councils were being called. Ancient weapons were being prepared. The Empire had not fought a major war in decades. Their warriors were eager for battle. No one in the Velkari Empire was worried. Humanity was young, primitive, weak. The war would last maybe a few weeks. The humans would learn their lesson about insulting their betters. No one realized that humans had spent thousands of years fighting each other. No one knew that humanity's entire evolution was based on one simple trait: never give up, no matter how impossible the odds. The Velkari were about to learn what happened when you cornered a species that refused to quit. The emergency meeting room deep under Geneva was crowded with people who rarely met in person. Admiral Seojin Han stood at the head of the table, looking at the faces of Earth's military leaders. Behind him, a massive screen showed the recording from the Horizon's promise, playing the moment humanity accidentally declared war on the Velkari Empire. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 3 months, Seojin said calmly. 3 months before the Velkari Armada arrives at Earth. According to our intelligence, they're bringing 2,000 warships. We have exactly 200 ships that can fight, and most of those are converted cargo vessels. Can we evacuate? Asked General Park from the Korean Defense Force. Get people off Earth? To where? Replied Admiral Chen from the Mars Colony Fleet. Every human settlement is marked on Velkari star maps. They'll hunt us down wherever we go. A woman stood up from the back of the room. She was young, maybe 30, with scars on her face and arms. Her name was Minji Kang, and she represented the Mars underground fighters, colonists who had spent years fighting corporate security forces. So we're just going to wait here and die? Minji asked. That's the plan? Sit down, Ms. Kang, said an older admiral. This is a military discussion. No, Minji didn't sit. You asked me here because I know how to fight when you're outnumbered. So I'm talking. You military people, you think in terms of fair fights. Big fleets against big fleets. But that's not how you win when the enemy is stronger. Seojin held up his hand to quiet the other officers. Let her speak. Minji walked to the front of the room. On Mars, corporate security had better weapons, better armor, better everything. They had us outnumbered 10-1. But we won. You know how? We didn't fight fair. We used their own rules against them. We hit supply lines. We made them scared to leave their bases. We made them waste resources guarding things that didn't matter. The Velkari aren't corporate security, someone muttered. No, they're worse. They're predictable. Minji pulled up files on the screen. I've spent the last 2 weeks studying every Velkari battle in our database. They fight the same way every time. Big formations. Honor challenges. They announce their attacks. They give enemies chances to surrender. They follow ancient rules written thousands of years ago. Seojun leaned forward, interested. And we don't have to fight that way. We're not part of their culture. We don't care about their honor. We just need to survive. A door opened and 3 more people entered. The first was Junho Yang, a weapons engineer who had been blacklisted from working with most governments because his ideas were too dangerous. The second was Yuna Oh, a psychologist who specialized in understanding alien minds. The third was Minho Bai, a logistics coordinator from the outer colonies. Sorry we're late, Junho said, not sounding sorry at all. But I have good news. I know how we can hurt them. Everyone turned to look at him. Junho pulled up schematics on the screen. The Velkari use a standardized ship design across their entire fleet. Same engines, same shields, same communication systems. It's very efficient, but it means they all have the same weaknesses. What weaknesses? Asked Admiral Chen. Their shield generators operate on a specific frequency. If we hit them with electromagnetic pulses tuned to that exact frequency, their shields collapse. Completely. How do you know this? Seojin asked. I studied the wreckage of a Velkari ship that crashed in the Andromeda sector 20 years ago. The Coalition kept it secret, but I found the records. Yuna-Oh stepped forward next. I have something too. The Velkari psychology is based on honor and direct combat. They can't handle uncertainty. In every battle they've fought, they've expected their enemy to follow rules. When someone breaks those rules, they freeze. They don't know how to respond. So you're saying we should cheat, said General Park. I'm saying we should survive, Yuna replied. Honor is something you worry about when you're winning. We need to make them scared, confused, and unable to predict what we'll do next. Minho Bai was the last to speak. And I can tell you how to keep our fleet supplied while staying mobile. The Velkari will expect us to defend our planets. Instead, we should make them chase us. Use their size against them. Big fleets need big supply lines. We can move faster than they can. Seojin Han looked around the room. He could see the other military officers were uncomfortable. What these people were suggesting went against everything they had learned about warfare. It wasn't honorable. It wasn't clean. It wasn't the way civilized species fought, but they weren't going to survive by being civilized. All right, Seojin said. Here's what we're going to do. We're not going to meet them in open battle. We're not going to defend our planets the way they expect. We're going to make them regret coming to our space. Over the next 2 months, humanity transformed. Every shipyard worked day and night. But they weren't building traditional warships. They were building things the galaxy had never seen. Old cargo haulers were converted into remote-controlled drones. Each one was loaded with nuclear weapons and given simple instructions. Ram the biggest enemy ship you can find. Hundreds of small fighter craft were built, each one barely big enough for one pilot. They were fast, cheap, and designed to swarm larger ships like insects. Junho Yang's team worked on unconventional weapons. Electromagnetic pulse bombs. Computer viruses specifically designed to attack Velkari systems. Mines that looked like regular space debris. Nuclear-pumped lasers that could be hidden on asteroids. Yuna-Oh trained crews in psychological warfare. They would broadcast fake surrender signals. They would make it look like ships were damaged when they weren't. They would use every dirty trick humans had learned from thousands of years of fighting each. Other Minji-Kang took the best fighters from Mars and turned them into guerrilla warfare instructors. They taught regular soldiers how to ambush, how to retreat, how to make every battle cost the enemy more than they expected to pay. Meanwhile, humanity's 200 real warships were being upgraded. They couldn't match Velkari firepower, but they could be faster, more maneuverable, harder to predict. On Earth, people watched the preparations with a mixture of hope and fear. The news channel showed the work being done, but everyone knew the odds. 200 ships against 2,000. It should be impossible. But then someone remembered something from human history. There had been a battle thousands of years ago, where 300 soldiers held off an army of hundreds of thousands. They had all died, but they had shown that numbers weren't everything. Another person mentioned a different war, where a small island nation had fought the largest empire in the world, and won through refusing to surrender. Stories started spreading. Stories of underdogs who won. Stories of humans who faced impossible odds and survived anyway. It became a movement. People wore symbols from those old battles. They painted their ships with historical references. They reminded each other that humans had always specialized in winning when they shouldn't. Captain Taemin Kim and his crew from the Horizon's Promise volunteered for the most dangerous mission. They would use their ship to sneak into enemy territory and gather intelligence. It was their mistake that started the war. They wanted to help end it. Admiral Seo Jun-han watched all of this from his command center. He knew they were still probably going to lose, but at least they would make the Valkyrie work for it. At least they would show the galaxy that humans didn't quit. On the edge of the solar system, the defense fleet gathered. 200 ships of various sizes and designs. Behind them, hidden among asteroids and moons, were hundreds of remote-controlled drones, thousands of mines, weapons that no honorable species would use. The captains and crews knew they were probably going to die, but they also knew something the Valkyrie didn't. Humans had spent their entire evolution learning how to hunt things bigger and stronger than themselves. They had chased prey across continents for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. They had fought wars that lasted decades, even centuries, never quitting no matter how bad things looked. The Valkyrie were about to learn what it meant to fight a species that specialized in persistence. On the last day before the Valkyrie arrival, Admiral Seo Jun-han broadcast a message to all human forces. They think we'll fight like them. That's their first mistake. They think we'll fight with honor. That's their second. They think we'll quit when we're losing. That will be their last. Remember, we don't have to win every battle. We just have to refuse to lose the war. The message ended. The fleet waited. And somewhere beyond the edge of human space, 2,000 Valkyrie warships were coming, expecting an easy victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them. War Master Kalavesh stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Glory, watching the human solar system appear on his screens. Behind him, 2,000 Valkyrie warships moved in perfect formation, a sight that had made countless species surrender without firing a single shot. "This will be quick," Kalavesh said to his second-in-command. "The humans are primitives. They will see our fleet and realize their mistake. Perhaps they will beg for mercy. And if they don't," asked the second-in-command, "then we will destroy them in one battle, as a lesson to others who might think to insult the Valkyrie Empire." The fleet moved deeper into human space. Kalavesh had fought in 12 major wars during his career. He had studied warfare at the ancient academies. He knew every classical strategy, every traditional tactic. This battle would be like all the others. Two fleets would meet, exchange honorable challenges, and the stronger side would win. "War Master, I'm detecting the human fleet," reported the sensor officer. "They're arranging themselves near their fourth planet." "I count approximately 200 vessels," Kalavesh laughed. 200 against 2,000. They're either very brave or very foolish. The Valkyrie fleet maintained its approach, broadcasting traditional war chants on all frequencies. This was how civilized species fought, with ceremony, with honor, with respect for ancient customs. "The humans are responding," said the communications officer. "They're sending a message. Put it through." Admiral Seo Jun-han's face appeared on the screen. He looked calm, almost relaxed. "Valkyrie fleet, this war started from a misunderstanding. We ask one final time for peaceful resolution." Kalavesh sneered. "Your insult cannot be withdrawn. Prepare yourselves for honorable combat." "As you wish," Seo Jun replied. Then he smiled, and it wasn't a friendly smile. "But don't say we didn't warn you." The screen went dark. Kalavesh ordered his fleet forward. The Valkyrie ships moved in their traditional attack formation, a pattern refined over thousands of years. It was beautiful, perfect, unstoppable. Then everything went wrong. The first sign of trouble came when 20 human cargo ships suddenly accelerated to impossible speeds, directly toward the Valkyrie fleet. They were moving so fast that they were glowing from friction with space dust. Evasive action, Kalvesh ordered. But the Velkari fleet was designed for formation flying, not quick maneuvers. The cargo ships, empty, remote-controlled, filled with nuclear weapons, slammed into 3 of the largest Velkari warships at a significant fraction of light speed. The explosions lit up space like new suns. When the light faded, the 3 warships were gone. Just debris and radiation. What was that? Kalvesh demanded. What kind of tactic is that? His second-in-command looked shocked. They used unmanned ships as weapons. They didn't even try to fight. They just crashed into us. That's against the rules of honorable combat. I don't think they care about honor, War Master. Before Kalvesh could respond, the human fleet scattered in every direction. They didn't maintain formation. They didn't follow any logical pattern. They just spread out like insects, each ship moving independently. All ships maintain formation, Kalvesh ordered. Fire on any human vessel in range. The Velkari ships opened fire, their powerful weapons tracking the human vessels. They destroyed 5, then 10, then 15 human ships. But the humans kept moving erratically, making themselves hard to hit. Then the second surprise came. On every communication frequency, hundreds of human ships started broadcasting surrender signals. Not real surrenders, fake ones. Automated messages saying, "We surrender. Please don't shoot," playing over and over. Velkari tradition said you couldn't fire on a surrendering enemy. The fleet hesitated, trying to figure out which surrenders were real. In that moment of hesitation, the human fighters attacked. Hundreds of small, fast ships swarmed out from behind asteroids and moons. Each one carried only a few missiles, but there were so many of them. They moved in chaotic patterns, never staying in formation, impossible to predict. All batteries open fire, Kalvesh ordered. The Velkari ships fired thousands of shots, destroying fighter after fighter, but the humans just kept coming, and their missiles were finding targets. The Velkari shields were strong, but the humans weren't attacking with normal weapons. Junho Yang's electromagnetic pulse weapons detonated across the Velkari fleet. The pulses were perfectly tuned to the exact frequency of Velkari shield generators. Ship after ship suddenly found their shields collapsing, shields failing. Reports came from dozens of ships. "We're exposed!" How are they doing this? Kalvesh stared at his displays in disbelief. The human weapons shouldn't work. The humans were primitive. They weren't supposed to know about Velkari shield frequencies. Then the mines started detonating. Thousands of small explosives, disguised as normal space debris, had been scattered throughout the area. When the Velkari ships passed through them, they exploded. Not enough to destroy a warship, but enough to damage sensors, weapons, engines. And then the nuclear-pumped lasers fired from hidden positions on asteroids. These weren't normal lasers. They used nuclear explosions to generate incredibly powerful beams, capable of cutting through starship armor like it was paper. 5 more Velkari capital ships died in the first 10 minutes of battle. Kalvesh couldn't believe what he was seeing. His fleet was being torn apart by an enemy that wasn't even fighting properly. No formations, no honor, no rules. Just chaos and violence and tricks. "War Master, we've lost 30 ships," his second-in-command reported. 50, 70! All ships execute defensive pattern 7. The Velkari fleet tried to regroup, moving into a defensive formation that had worked for thousands of years. But the humans didn't follow the expected response. Instead, a voice came over the communications channels. Yuna-O's voice, though Kalvesh didn't know her name. "Hello, Velkari warriors," Yuna said calmly. "We've been studying your battle records. We know about defensive pattern 7. We know it leaves your engine clusters exposed from below. Thank you for making this easy." Then human torpedoes came from below the Velkari formation, exactly where Yuna said they would be vulnerable. The attack was perfectly timed, perfectly aimed. 20 more ships suffered critical engine damage. Kalvesh felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Fear. Not fear of dying, that was honorable. Fear that he didn't understand what he was fighting. The humans weren't following any logical strategy. How could he plan against an enemy that refused to follow rules? "War Master, we need to withdraw," his second-in-command urged. "We've lost over 300 ships. The Velkari never retreat," Kalvesh roared. "Then we'll lose the entire fleet." Kalvesh looked at his displays. His beautiful formation was in chaos. Ships were colliding with each other, trying to avoid human attacks from every direction. Communication channels were filled with jamming, Fake distress signals, psychological warfare broadcasts that were making his crews panic, and the humans just kept attacking. Every time he thought he understood their pattern, they changed it. Every time he tried a new defensive strategy, they countered it instantly. Captain Taemin Kim watched from his ship as the battle unfolded. The Horizon's Promise was staying back, recording everything, sending real-time intelligence to Admiral Seojin Han. "They're breaking," Ji-won said from her console. "The Valkyrie formation is collapsing. Get ready," Taemin ordered. "When they retreat, we follow. We need to know where they're going." On the Eternal Glory, War Master Kalvesh made the hardest decision of his life. All ships can retreat. Fall back to Rally Point Alpha. The Valkyrie fleet turned and jumped to faster-than-light speeds, escaping the battle. Behind them, they left almost 300 destroyed warships and thousands of dead warriors. In the human fleet, a cheer went up. They had done it. They had made the invincible Valkyrie retreat. Admiral Seojin Han's voice came through every human ship's speakers. "Good work, but don't celebrate yet. That was just the first battle. Now we hunt them." The human fleet didn't regroup into a defensive formation around Earth. Instead, they split into small groups and headed out into space, chasing the retreating Valkyrie. This wasn't how space wars were supposed to work. You didn't pursue after winning a defensive battle. You stayed and protected your territory. But humans didn't fight normal space wars. Throughout the galaxy, other species watched the battle recordings in shock. The Valkyrie had retreated. The Valkyrie, who hadn't lost a major engagement in 3,000 years, had run away from a primitive species they outnumbered 10 to 1. In the Galactic Coalition chambers, debates erupted. Some species said the human tactics were dishonorable, barbaric, uncivilized. Others quietly started wondering if maybe humans had been underestimated. And in the Valkyrie Empire, High Chancellor Vexthor watched the battle recordings over and over, trying to understand what had gone wrong. His tactical computers couldn't predict human behavior. Their moves made no logical sense. They should have lost that battle. By every calculation, every historical precedent, they should have been destroyed, but they weren't. And now his fleet was running, damaged and demoralized, chased by an enemy that refused to fight fair. For the first time in his life, Vexthor wondered if the Valkyrie Empire had made a terrible mistake. 6 months had passed since the first battle, and the war had become a nightmare for the Valkyrie Empire. War Master Kalvesh was dead, executed by High Chancellor Vexthor for the crime of retreating. 3 other War Masters had been appointed and killed since then, each one unable to stop the human forces. The problem wasn't that humans were winning every battle. They weren't. They lost ships every day, but they never stopped coming. Never stopped attacking. Never gave the Valkyrie a moment to rest and regroup. In the Valkyrie Command Center, Vexthor stared at tactical displays that showed the chaos of the war. "Explain to me how we're losing," he said to his advisors. "We still have more ships than they do. We still have superior weapons. How are we losing?" "The humans don't fight like civilized beings," one advisor said carefully. "They attack supply convoys. They ambush repair stations. They hit us and disappear before we can respond. Our ships spend more time looking for enemies than fighting them." Another advisor added, "And their tactics keep changing. Every time we adapt to their strategy, they invent new ones. Yesterday, they tricked an entire battle group into chasing false sensor readings for 3 days, while their real forces attacked our shipyards." Vexthor slammed his fist on the table. "We are the Valkyrie. We have fought wars for 3,000 years. How can primitives outsmart us?" No one had an answer. Meanwhile, in human space, Admiral Seojin Han was planning the most audacious operation of the war. He stood in a briefing room with his top officers, including Captain Taemin Kim, who had been promoted after successfully leading several intelligence missions. "We're going to attack their homeworld," Seojin announced. The room went silent. "Sir, that's suicide," said one of the admirals. "Their homeworld has the heaviest defenses in the Empire. Even if we get there, we'd never get out." "I know," Seojin said calmly. "That's why we're not going to stay. We're going in, hitting military targets and leaving. The goal isn't to conquer. The goal is to prove a point. Nowhere is safe." Taemin leaned forward. "My crew volunteers. We've been gathering intelligence on Valkyrie space for months. We know the routes, the defenses, the patrol schedules. You understand this is probably a one-way trip?" Seojin asked. "We understand." This war started because of our mistake. Let us help end it. Over the next week, 50 ships prepared for the mission. They included the fastest vessels in the human fleet, carrying long-range missiles and experimental weapons from Junho Yang's workshops. The plan was insane, but most human plans were insane by Velkari standards. The route they would take was even crazier. Instead of using normal space lanes, they would fly through a star's corona, using the radiation to mask their signatures. Then they would use gravitational slings around 3 different black holes to gain speed. It was a route that no sane strategist would attempt, because one small mistake meant instant death. Perfect for humans. We launch in 6 hours, Seojin told the assembled crews. The Velkari won't see this coming because they can't imagine anyone trying it. Use that to your advantage. While the human strike force prepared, Minji Kang was leading a different operation across the galaxy. Her guerrilla fighters had just liberated 2 human colonies that the Velkari had captured early in the war. They didn't fight the Velkari in open battle. Instead, they sabotaged supply lines, hacked communication systems, and generally made occupation so expensive and difficult that the Velkari abandoned the colonies. That's 7 colonies we've taken back, Minji reported to Earth. The Velkari are spreading their forces thin, trying to hold territory and fight us at the same time. Back at Velkari High Command, Vexthor was reading reports that made his head hurt. Humans had just destroyed a major supply depot using weapons that shouldn't exist. They had tricked a fleet into friendly fire incidents. They had even hacked into Velkari communication networks and played demoralizing music for 3 days straight before the security teams could stop it. We need a new strategy, Vexthor said. Everything we try fails. Everything. Perhaps, one advisor said nervously. Perhaps we should study the humans more carefully. Not their weapons, their history, their psychology. Vexthor normally would have dismissed this as cowardice, but he was desperate. Do it. Find out everything about these creatures. Over the next weeks, Velkari scholars began studying human history in detail. What they found disturbed them deeply. Humans had fought wars that lasted 30 years, 100 years. They had civil wars where millions died, then unified to fight external enemies. They had been invaded, occupied, nearly destroyed, and always came back. There were stories of human soldiers continuing to fight decades after wars officially ended, never surrendering, never quitting. One particular phrase kept appearing in human military history: victory through attrition. Humans would simply outlast their enemies. They would take losses that would break any other species and keep fighting anyway. They're persistence predators, one Velkari scholar reported to Vexthor. On their homeworld, humans evolved to hunt prey by chasing it until it collapsed from exhaustion. Sometimes for days. They didn't need to be faster or stronger. They just needed to never give up. Vexthor felt cold. And we challenged them to a war of attrition. Yes, Chancellor. And their psychology is built for exactly this kind of conflict. While we value quick, honorable victories, they're comfortable with long, grinding struggles. They can fight this war for years, decades. They'll never stop. Before Vexthor could respond to this news, alarms started blaring throughout the command center. Chancellor, human ships have appeared in our home system. That's impossible. How did they get past our defenses? On the bridge of the Horizon's Promise, Captain Taemin Kim smiled as his ship and 49 others dropped out of faster-than-light travel right in the heart of Velkari space. The journey had been insane. They'd lost 6 ships to the Corona Passage and 2 more to gravitational miscalculations at the black holes. But they'd made it. All ships spread out, Taemin ordered. Hit the military targets only. Avoid civilian areas. We're not here to massacre innocent people. We're here to send a message. The human ships scattered across the Velkari homeworld's orbit. They fired missiles at military shipyards, defense stations, and the orbital fortress that had stood unconquered for 2,000 years. The Velkari defense fleet scrambled to respond, but they were confused, disorganized. No enemy had ever reached the homeworld before. Doyen Lee coordinated the weapons fire from his console, targeting orbital fortress, firing. 3 experimental nuclear-pumped lasers built by Junho Yang's team fired simultaneously. The beams burned through the fortress's shields and punched massive holes in its hull. It didn't explode. Humans didn't want unnecessary casualties, but it was crippled. Broadcasting on all frequencies, Hyejin Choi reported. Every news network in the Empire is showing this live. That was the real goal. Not to destroy the homeworld, but to humiliate it. to show every Velkari citizen that their mighty empire couldn't protect even their most sacred world. From his command ship above the planet, High Chancellor Vexthor watched human vessels dart between his defense forces, striking targets at will. His people, who had never known defeat, were watching their homeworld burn. "Get me a communication channel to the human fleet," Vexthor ordered quietly. When Taemon's face appeared on his screen, Vexthor saw something in the young captain's eyes he hadn't expected. No joy in the destruction, no pride in the victory. Just tired determination. "You've made your point," Vexthor said. "You can reach us anywhere." "Yes," Taemon replied. "And we will keep reaching you. Keep hitting you. Keep making you spend resources and lives defending everything. We'll fight this war for 10 years, 20, however long it takes. You're willing to die for this? We're willing to survive. There's a difference." The human ships began jumping away, disappearing before the Velkari could organize an effective response. They'd lost 15 ships out of 50, a terrible casualty rate by any standard. But they'd proven what they came to prove. Across the galaxy, recordings of the raid spread to every species in the coalition. The Velkari, the unconquerable empire, had watched helplessly as primitives attacked their homeworld and escaped. Some species began quietly reaching out to humanity, offering trade agreements and technology exchanges. Others started hiring human strategic advisors to modernize their militaries. Everyone wanted to understand how this species fought. But in the Velkari command center, Vexthor sat alone, reading human history texts. He read about Earth's world wars where tens of millions died but the fighting never stopped. He read about sieges that lasted years. He read about soldiers who kept fighting even when victory was impossible. And he realized the truth. The Velkari couldn't win this war. Not because humans were stronger, but because they literally would not stop fighting. Ever. They would keep coming, keep attacking, keep refusing to quit until one side or the other was completely destroyed. The Velkari could destroy humanity, but it would cost them everything: their empire, their economy, their military. The humans would make sure of that. They would make the Velkari pay for every human life with 100 Velkari lives. For the first time, Vexthor considered something that no Velkari leader had ever seriously considered: surrender. 1 year after the war began, High Chancellor Vexthor made a decision that would have been unthinkable before he met humanity. He requested a secret meeting with Admiral Seojin Han, mediated by the Galactic Coalition on a neutral space station. The other coalition species were shocked. The Velkari were actually asking for negotiations. Some thought it was a trap. Others thought Vexthor had gone mad. But they arranged the meeting anyway, curious to see what would happen. Seojin Han arrived at the station with a small security detail, including Doyen Lee. The admiral was thin, tired, showing the strain of a year of constant warfare, but his eyes were still sharp and determined. Vexthor came alone except for 2 guards. The Velkari Chancellor looked even worse than Seojun. His people were demoralized, his economy was collapsing, and he'd lost over half his fleet to an enemy that refused to fight fair. They met in a simple conference room. For a long moment they just stared at each other across the table. "Your tactics are dishonorable," Vexthor finally said. "You fight like cowards. You ambush, you deceive, you break every rule of civilized warfare." Seojin nodded calmly. "Yes, we do. Because honor is a luxury we can't afford when fighting a superior force. We fight to survive, not to impress anyone." "I have studied your history," Vexthor continued. "Your species has been fighting wars for thousands of years. Wars that lasted decades. Wars where millions died, yet you never stopped fighting." "That's true. The longest war in your records lasted 116 years. Multiple generations fought and died, never seeing the end of the conflict." "The 100 Years' War," Seojin confirmed, "actually lasted longer than 100 years, ironically." Vexthor leaned forward. "So tell me, Admiral, how long are you prepared to fight us? How many years? How many generations?" Seojin didn't hesitate. "As long as it takes. 10 years, 20, 50. A century if necessary. We'll teach our children to fight you. They'll teach their children. We won't stop until either you're destroyed or you leave us alone." "Even if it costs you everything?" "Yes, because if we don't fight, you'll destroy us anyway. At least this way, we'll make you regret it." Vexthor sat back in his chair. He looked older than when he'd entered the room. "The Velkari have fought many wars, but none like this. Our wars last months, maybe a year or two. We fight until one side clearly wins, then the loser surrenders with honor. That's not how we work, Seojin said. We don't surrender. We don't quit. It's not in our nature. I know. That's why I'm here. Vexthor pulled up data displays showing the state of his empire. In 1 year, you've destroyed half our fleet. Our economy is in ruins. Our people are terrified. Not because you're stronger than us, you're not. But because you won't stop. Every time we hurt you, you just keep coming. We don't know how to fight an enemy that refuses to lose. So what do you want? I want to end this war before it destroys both our species. Seojun studied the Velkari leader carefully. You're offering surrender? No, the Velkari don't surrender. We're offering a negotiated peace. There's a difference. In our culture, yes. A surrender is shameful, but a negotiated peace between worthy opponents is acceptable. Seojun almost laughed. A year ago you said we were primitives. Now we're worthy opponents? A year ago I didn't understand what humanity was. Now I do. You're predators who evolved to exhaust your prey. You're not the strongest or fastest species, but you're the most persistent. You never give up, ever. Vexthor paused. That's terrifying. Over the next 3 weeks, negotiations continued. Other species in the coalition watched with fascination as the proud Velkari and the stubborn humans worked out terms. There were arguments, threats, moments where it seemed like the talks would collapse. But both sides kept coming back to the table because both sides knew the truth. This war could go on forever, and forever would destroy them both. The final treaty was signed on a human date that would become a galactic holiday. Victory through Persistence Day. The terms were harsh for the Velkari. The Velkari Empire would publicly admit the war started from a misunderstanding and apologize to humanity. They would pay reparations to rebuild damaged human colonies. Both species would sign a mutual defense treaty, combining Velkari military strength with human tactical innovation. Humanity would gain full voting rights in the Galactic Coalition, no longer treated as junior members. Cultural and military exchange programs would be established so both species could learn from each other. When the treaty was announced, the galaxy was stunned. The Velkari, who had never lost a war, had effectively admitted defeat. Some Velkari citizens were outraged, calling for Vexthor's removal, but most were just relieved the war was over. Humans celebrated, though their celebrations were quieter than expected. They'd won, but at terrible cost. Over 50,000 humans had died. Dozens of ships were destroyed. Colonies had been damaged. Victory didn't feel glorious. It felt like survival. Captain Taemin Kim was promoted to ambassador, tasked with building diplomatic relationships between humanity and the Velkari. The mistake that started the war became a strange kind of diplomatic credential. Who better to prevent misunderstandings than someone who had caused the biggest one in galactic history? Jiwon Park was assigned to lead the first joint human-Velkari research station, studying how their different perspectives could advance science. Velkari researchers were amazed at how humans approached problems, always looking for unusual solutions, never accepting that something was impossible. Hyojin Choi developed a new universal translation system with Velkari linguists. The system had multiple redundancies and confirmation protocols to prevent the kind of error that started the war. It was adopted throughout the coalition. Doyen Lee was invited to train Velkari security forces in asymmetric warfare tactics. At first, the Velkari officers were insulted. They were warriors, not guerrillas. But after seeing what these tactics could do, they reluctantly admitted that honor didn't win every fight. Narration helped rebuild damaged Velkari infrastructure, sharing human engineering techniques. She found that combining Velkari precision with human improvisation created better results than either approach alone. Admiral Seojin Han retired from active military duty and became Earth's defense minister. He spent his time writing a book about the war, trying to explain to both species how they'd ended up fighting and how they'd found peace. Minji Kang returned to Mars as a hero, though she refused military promotions. She opened a training academy teaching guerrilla tactics to any species that wanted to learn how to defend themselves against overwhelming force. Junho Yang continued developing weapons, though now he worked with Velkari engineers. Together they created defensive systems that made both species safer. Yuna Oh wrote a best-selling book called How to Win Wars Without Honor. It became required reading at military academies across the galaxy. In it, She argued that different species needed different approaches to conflict, and that no single way was always right. Minho Bai coordinated the massive humanitarian effort to help both sides recover from the war. He organized food shipments, medical supplies, and reconstruction equipment, proving that humans were as good at building peace as they were at fighting wars. 5 years after the war ended, the galaxy had changed. Humanity was no longer seen as a primitive species, but as a major power. The Velkari Empire, humbled but not broken, had become humanity's closest ally. Other species started copying human tactics. The Galactic Coalition's military doctrine was completely revised. Wars became shorter, more strategic, less predictable. The old ways of fighting, rigid formations, honor challenges, predictable tactics were seen as outdated. At a coalition summit, Taman and Vexthor sat together, watching other species debate galactic policy. They had become unlikely friends, united by the shared experience of a war neither had wanted. "Do you regret it?" Taman asked quietly. "Starting the war?" Vexthor thought for a moment. "I regret the deaths, the destruction, but not what came after. Before the war, my people were arrogant. We thought our way was the only way. You taught us that the galaxy is bigger and stranger than we imagined, and you taught us that we belong here." Taman replied. "Before the war, other species treated us like children. Now they treat us as equals, because you forced them to. That's very human of you." They both laughed. Across the room, a new species was being inducted into the coalition. They were aggressive, militaristic, confident. They made demands instead of requests. They threatened economic sanctions if their terms weren't met immediately. The coalition representatives looked uncertain. This was exactly how diplomatic incidents started. Some species were already suggesting military action. Then Vexthor and Seojin Han walked over together. The sight of them, the Velkari Chancellor and the human admiral who had fought each other to a standstill, made the new species pause. "Let us handle this," Seojin said to the other coalition members. He and Vexthor approached the aggressive newcomers with calm smiles. "Welcome to the Galactic Coalition," Vexthor said politely. "We hope your membership will be productive." "Before you proceed with your demands," Seojin added, "you should know something about how things work here." The leader of the new species sneered. "And what's that?"